Greetings and welcome. I am Justavor, bringing you what I hope is constructive information on what the system of white supremacy, racism is, and how it works, as well as what can be done to replace it with the system of justice. Why couldn't Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking solve this problem? Most people are familiar with the famed mathematical physicist Albert Einstein. He is credited with developing many theories explaining the functions of the universe, some of which have much evidence supporting them, such as the theories on the universal speed of light, general and special relativity, and subsequently black holes, gravitational vortexes, and gravitational waves, and others, including his unified field theory. Albert Einstein is so revered as one of the most intelligent people that have ever lived that his name itself has become a synonym for genius. A question that comes to mind is, why couldn't Albert Einstein, who gave us so many profound and universal scientific discoveries, and other notable white geniuses, solve the problem of the system of white supremacy, racism? On this channel, we have concluded that the terms racism and white supremacy are synonymous and interchangeable, having the same definition, which is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and who are dedicated to the mistreatment and subjugation of all those they have classified as not white. Now, I'm no expert on Einstein. I couldn't tell you much on his life or his work. I'm also no Einstein when it comes to the system of white supremacy. See what I did there? The intention of this video is to explore the question of why those who classify themselves as white and who love to tout their intelligence, especially compared to non-white people, seem to be completely incapable of solving a problem that they themselves created and control. Is it true that with all they have credited themselves for discovering and inventing, including the current global system of racism, white supremacy, they are just shy of the smarts it takes to dismantle that same system? Or is it simply because they find it logical to maintain this unjust system that has resulted in their control over most of the world's resources, as well as power over those they have classified as not white? Why not test this theory using someone so famous for being smart and able to solve problems that his very name is synonymous with such? Albert Einstein. There is much written about Einstein, and there was much Einstein wrote himself about when it came to the various problems or mysteries he attempted to solve in regard to the universe. Being that Albert Einstein was born in the Germany concept in 1879, was targeted by Nazis during the Holocaust because Adolf Hitler deemed Jewish people to be non-white and thus deserving of extermination, Einstein escaped Germany to the England concept and immigrated to the so-called United States in 1930 during the Jim Crow era. One would think that he would have put time and energy towards the greatest problem in the world, white supremacy, racism. Surely he would have had something to say. What did Einstein say about racism, white supremacy? I am aware of a letter or essay written by Einstein entitled The Negro Question, written in 1946. In the writing, Einstein appears to appeal to the logical nature of his fellow white team members, saying, "In the United States, everyone feels assured of his worth as an individual. No one humbles himself before another person or class. Even the great difference in wealth, the superior power of a few, cannot undermine this healthy self-confidence and natural respect for the dignity of one's fellow man. There is, however, a somber point in the social outlook of Americans. Their sense of equality and human dignity is mainly limited to men of white skins. Even among these, there are prejudices of which I, as a Jew, am clearly conscious. But they are unimportant in comparison with the attitude of the whites towards their fellow citizens of darker complexions, particularly towards Negroes. The more I feel an American, the more this situation pains me. I can escape the feeling of complicity in it only by speaking out." I find it interesting that Einstein says that. I can escape the feeling of complicity in it only by speaking out. Only by speaking out. Would this mean that there are no other actions we should expect of him? This seems to be a sort of, well, I spoke out. I tried the best I could. Ah, well. But again, he was a genius. Surely he would anticipate that many of his fellow teammates would not agree with him. He writes, "Many a sincere person will answer, our attitude towards Negroes is the result of unfavorable experiences which we have had by living side by side with Negroes in this country. They are not our equals in intelligence, sense of responsibility, reliability. I am firmly convinced that whoever believes this suffers from a fatal misconception. Your ancestors dragged these black people from their homes by force, and in the white man's quest for wealth and an easy life, they have been ruthlessly oppressed, exploited, degraded into slavery. The modern prejudice against Negroes is the result of the desire to maintain this unworthy condition." He mentions white people enslaving one another in Greece, saying, "The ancient Greeks also had slaves. They were not Negroes, but white men who had been taken captive in war. There could be no talk of racial differences, and yet Aristotle, one of the great Greek philosophers, declared slaves inferior beings who were justly subdued and deprived of their liberty. It is clear that he was enmeshed in a traditional prejudice from which, despite his extraordinary intellect, he could not free himself." Is Einstein comparing himself to Aristotle, making a comparison between Aristotle not being able to free himself from his perceived superiority over the slaves of Greece, and Einstein's own perceived inability to end the system of white supremacy as a member of the white team, especially as a new recruit in the so-called United States? Einstein continues, "A large part of our attitude towards things is conditioned by opinions and emotions which we unconsciously absorb as children from our own environment. In other words, it is tradition, besides inherent aptitudes and qualities, which makes us what we are. But we rarely reflect on how relatively small, as compared with the powerful influence of tradition, is the influence of our conscious thought upon our conduct and convictions." Wait a minute. Opinions and emotions unconsciously absorbed as children? So racism in white children is unconsciously absorbed? Last time I checked, racism, white supremacy, in those days was far more overt than it is today. I mean, educational systems and other aspects of society were segregated in the North as well as the South. If one was a white child at the time, I would be rather certain that those opinions and emotions about niggers and other non-white people would have been drilled quite consciously into their psyche. He did say that it was tradition and that conscious thought was much more powerful upon white people's conduct and convictions than were those unconscious opinions and emotions supposedly absorbed as children. Albert Einstein may be a famed genius of mathematical physics and not an expert in sociology, but I still think that he was too smart to not recognize the conscious effort being made to ensure that white children understood what it means to be white in a system of white supremacy. It's almost as if he's shielding suspected racist children while acknowledging that they eventually become conscious participants of the white team in the tradition of maintaining the system of white supremacy. I suspect that Albert Einstein may have been practicing racism by making false assertions about what the system is and how it works, leading to confusion among those victims of racism, white supremacy, who would read this writing. I'm sure you're saying, this guy Justavor is tripping, with no map in sight. Let me ask this question. Is it logical for victims of racism, white supremacy, to suspect anyone who can practice white supremacy of being a white supremacist? I wonder if Einstein would agree with that logic. Anyways, Albert Einstein, suspected racist, seems to recognize that white supremacy, racism, is a system. I wonder if he would agree with our definition. Not only does he appear to recognize it as a system, but he refers to racism as tradition. Then he goes on to write, "It would be foolish to despise tradition. But with our growing self-consciousness and increasing intelligence, we must begin to control tradition and assume a critical attitude towards it, if human relations are ever to change for the better. We must try to recognize what in our accepted tradition is damaging to our fate and dignity, and shape our lives accordingly." I think of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and the Cress theory of color confrontation, when I suppose that the thing that they find damaging to their fate and dignity is genetic annihilation. Which is why these appeals to the better nature of those who classify themselves as white just don't seem to be working towards ending the system of white supremacy racism. What has happened has been a refinement of the system. In other words, white supremacists continue to find ways to make white supremacy work better. This has resulted in the system not only being maintained, but expanded. What, however, can the man of goodwill do to combat this deeply rooted prejudice? He must have the courage to set an example by word and deed, and must watch lest his children become influenced by this racial bias. Einstein's mentioned that this man of goodwill must have courage to set the example by word and by deed in order to combat racism. The focus of counter-racism is to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice. Combating the system is not enough. Being against racism or being anti-racist is not enough. Ending the system is the primary focus. According to Einstein, I do not believe there is a way in which this deeply entrenched evil can be quickly healed. But until this goal is reached, there is no greater satisfaction for a just and well-meaning person than the knowledge that he has devoted his best energies to the service of the good cause. My question to you is, did he really? Was Einstein a person we can honestly say devoted his best energies to the service of the good cause of ending white supremacy? As a white person, did he do everything he could to end the system of white supremacy racism? He says that he doesn't see how this deeply entrenched evil can be quickly healed. But I would argue that if white people really wanted to, they could end this system of injustice and produce a system of justice in a day, by the end of the day, if they wanted to. Don't agree? That's fine. I will point out how quickly things shifted when the pandemic started, and this was with much resistance happening at the same time. Still, drastic, systemic changes were made. Now, imagine those in power putting, as Einstein said, their best energies to the service of the good cause. But apparently, even Einstein couldn't crack this one. Again, we're talking about the famed genius physicist Albert Einstein, problem solver number one, apparently. I also mentioned Stephen Hawking, another famed genius and physicist. I was searching for any comments at all Hawking had on the system of white supremacy racism, but all I could find was his fears of humans being replaced by artificial intelligence or superhumans, or both. Did Stephen Hawking even attempt to solve the problem of racism? Let me know if you know anything. Again, I'm no expert, and I wouldn't go looking for help from Neil deGrasse Tyson either. Mr. Tyson, victim of racism, is a person whose work I respect a great deal. His expertise and ability to expound on astrophysics in a manner that piques the interest of people of all age groups is something to admire. I just don't think Mr. Tyson will be much help towards solving the problem of white supremacy racism. I could be incorrect, but I don't think that I am. One thing is clearly evident. Regardless of how many Einsteins or Hawkings put before us, the problem of the system of white supremacy racism persists. With all these white geniuses, the problem continues. Here are my final questions on the matter, for this video at least. If these two geniuses couldn't solve the problem of the system of racism, does this mean that the problem is unsolvable? If white people can't fix it, is it unfixable? Could it be that since they too benefit from the system as members of the white team, white logic would dictate that it would be in their best interest to leave the problem unsolved? Feel free to leave your questions, comments, and concerns. For more information about the purpose and goals of this channel, as well as some basic definitions of words and terms we use in reference to our work, I have included a link below to a video containing this information. If you would like an even better understanding of the code and how it works, please visit producejustice.com to order the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. There are many constructive suggestions for ending the system of white supremacy, and Mr. Fuller's code book and its word guide act as guides to getting and keeping on code. If you feel this content is constructive and worth your time and energy, please subscribe and share to support the making of more content in the future. Much appreciation for all the Vors already subscribed. I am Justavor, and I'm still learning. Thank you for watching. Until next time.
Let me say something that gets to the very crux of the matter, and this may be offensive for some to hear who are not on the side that we're on. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
Say that again.
Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have